is so great to see everyone just networking, and people can't wait to share ideas with one another, so that's so exciting. And we're going to have a lovely lunch, and then we have some breakout sessions this afternoon that are a little bit more free, some time for us to talk with one another about things that we might share in common, issues that we're concerned with. So those are more collaborative times and a little bit more open times. And then I would invite all of you to stay for the reception this afternoon, which is this morning's catering is from Serendipity Catering. They've been voted the best green caterer in Denver. They just won that award again this year, so we're really proud to have them. And then this afternoon, just to share the wealth and show you guys many other regenerative folks that are in the area, we have Organic Roots, which is a catering company from Boulder, Colorado, and they serve largely locally sourced and organic food. So we have some really lovely chocolates that are purveyed right next door in Denver, and we have a whole lot of other just lovely things. I hope that you'll join us for that reception this afternoon. So, and then anybody who wants to stay and have supper later on, of course, it's just going to go until we all get tired. So it's really my pleasure to have Trey Cates here to introduce Carol Sanford. Trey has been a leader in the regenerative agriculture field for pretty much his entire career, as the lead and board chair for some time at the Savory Institute. And now Trey is venturing into the regenerative organization consulting area, and we're all kind of exploring what it might look like to have a shared consultancy grow here along the Front Range. And so I'm really grateful that Trey's able to join us today, and I know he's been in conversation with Carol for some time. A lot of folks today are finally getting to meet in person who've actually been having conversations with one another over email and phone for a long time, so it's so exciting to have everybody together. So I'm going to hand this over to Trey, and he's going to introduce Carol Sanford, who's rapidly becoming a very dear colleague and friend. So without further ado. Thank you, Trey.
Thank you very much. I don't necessarily need the microphone, and we'll let this be short, but I do appreciate the fact that Savory, through Hunter and others, has been mentioned often. Most of my experience in the regenerative space has begun and continues to grow in my relationship with Alan Savory and the Institute. It has been an incredibly meaningful and fulfilling part of my life over the last 10 years. And it has provided an enormous amount of insight into how we can be very intentional to bring those regenerative principles into what I would call a living system that is people-oriented versus just creature or natural ecosystem oriented, which is where I spent most of my time developing those ideals. And so with that being the case, over the last 10 years, we developed this regenerative network within the regenerative agricultural space that has been actually quite impactful. It began in about 2010 when we came up with the idea. In 2011, we started to launch the idea into the arena for agricultural areas around the world, and with that was the movement to building these hubs. And those hubs are now in 21 countries, and actually I think by the end of the year we'll have over 40 of them that are really building these regenerative practices locally and beginning with the soils. And so that has set the stage for us to be able to say, so now ultimately all of us have to make decisions. What does that look like in organizations? And knowing that we can change a lot of the practices on the ground, but ultimately policies, decisions, everything gets put up into an organization that now needs to have a framework that allows for that regenerative approach. And I have been very appreciative to beginning a relationship with Carol Sanford and the many people that she's really coached and advised and I'd say poured into over the last 30 plus years.
Yeah.
42.
42 years. So this regenerative movement, it was great to see Hunter bring up Rodell and to bring up some others in terms of Bucky, in terms of that regenerative idea, and Carol would be in that same category. I appreciate a lot of things that she's done, and one of the things is it's very clear that she is about relationship. She enters into relationship. She's very intentional about paying attention to what people are saying and why they're saying it. And so I will expect that if I said something that I shouldn't have said over the last 3 minutes,
I will let you know.
She will refrain me. So, I remember the very first phone call that I ever had or a conversation with Carol. It didn't take more than about 30 seconds for her to say, you just used multiple words that come from multiple paradigms, and you shouldn't be doing that. And
I didn't say you shouldn't be doing that. I could have called attention to it. And asked you to explain yourself.
That's right. So ultimately, I have appreciated that kind of candor. I've appreciated that kind of pouring into somebody else for the purposes of improving the capacity of the people that she's in relationship
Absolutely.
with. And it's been very meaningful, and I expect it will continue to be meaningful. I get to spend a few days with her in Santa Fe in a week or so. And I'm looking excited to do that with a bunch of other people who are committed to the same thing. So with no further ado, thank you, Carol, for being here, and thank you for allowing me to participate.
Thank you.
Thank you. And just in case you wonder if I'm sitting down, last night I stepped funny on a piece of ice, and shortly thereafter my knees started giving out under me, and I don't want to do that standing up here, so I thought I'd use it as backup, and I think, I better use it as a start, just to make sure. It's wonderful to be here, and as you said, Beth, meet people I've been talking to on the phone or Skype or Zoom or something. It was also interesting to see the list up here of people who are in the space and how many of them have been in what I call the change issue groups I've led for years. So Regenesis, the Terragenesis, all those folks, including the framework that Hunter gave Bill credit for, I actually created, and he created a rendition of it. So it's kind of fun to watch the evolution of how many people who've been a part of what I've been doing for years really begin to have a footprint in this world and make a huge difference. And of course, there's nothing else you want more than people who go take a fabulous idea and make something amazing happen. I have a particular way of working that you will get used to pretty quickly, either that or you won't, that Trey pointed out. But I always start with a couple of principles which I think are really important. And it has to do with the kind of worldview that I hold, or epistemology I hold, which is, okay, thanks. Don't look at those handouts yet. Just turn them over and we'll get to them in a minute. You can hand them out. I think it'd be easier, but don't get distracted in reading because they're supplemental to what I'm doing. So if you start reading, you'll miss what it is I'm going to suggest. But I wanted you to have a place to also make a note or two if you want. All right, so the epistemology, is how we learn and how we understand. And one of the words I have to disagree with Beth on immediately is I'm not an expert. I don't even believe in experts. I believe it's a dangerous idea. And the thought that we have that anybody can't understand and discover for themselves is one of the ones that I worry about. And that's a different epistemology. There are experts, and then there are people who study with you, and the experts always stay the experts. Mm-hmm. So my epistemology is that you must take everything on, I say, and test it rigorously. And you do that before you accept anything I offer. But secondly, I ask you to rigorously examine, and I'm not talking about it in a debating way, I'm talking about an experiential way, to go really live it, step into it, and then out of that, reflect on your own experience and decide whether an idea I give you to play with is worth taking on. So that's my first advice. I always say to people, do not trust me. Therefore, I want you to have a way you're working on it. And if all goes well, I'm going to give you a few minutes to play with some ideas in table conversations. I decided some years ago that I was disturbed by the way I heard people using the term regeneration. And I'm 75 years old, and I've been working with that term for 45 years. So this isn't a Johnny-come-lately. I watched the term coming back into play. It's an ancient idea. I grew up in a family which has a Native American tradition, a grandmother and grandfather, who taught me ideas that come primarily out of the Mohawk, Iroquois tradition. And those ideas that I see and believe are part of regeneration are ancient in that lineage. There's also the ancient spiritual traditions of Mahayana Buddhism, Sri Aurobindo and the Mother, some of the esoterics that come through Sufis. So these ideas are ancient, and one of the other things I need to complain about is I keep seeing it written as the next level of sustainability. That ain't true. It is ancient. It's not the next level of anything. We got to put a bunch of other stuff in the way between here and where it was trying to take us, because I think because we didn't quite have capacity for thinking and examining. So one of the things I want us to look at are some lessons from greenwashing. I bet you most of you in here are really annoyed when we watch people claim they're doing things they're not. Yeah? So we watch things that exist like clean coal, right? Clean burning gas, and you want to stick your finger down your throat or down theirs, right? When they say that. We have eco-friendly packaging, right? We have fuel consumption on automobiles, which are daily proven to not be there, to not be true. And all of those are greenwashing and people trying to make themselves appear to be doing something they're not. Now, I learned years ago that some of that is not as much out of evil as we think. Some of it's out of ignorance. Mm-hmm. And I went inside of companies like DuPont Corporation and worked with them in a way that we reversed a lot of the mining practices, reinvented new mining practices, and stopped them cutting down 90% of mountains in order to get titanium for titanium dioxide. We also built the UN Global Compact when Chad Holliday finally got to be chairman CEO. He also led the piece on the mining. He really didn't know. He could not see. And the more I watched how people could not see what they were claiming to do, I knew that what my work was to improve people's capacity to see, not to give them the answers, not to try and say, here is what you should look at. So what I'm going to offer are some ideas that I think, and my friend Pamela Bang or Genesis came up with this phrase, and I just love it. I use it over and over again, which is we have to be mindful of not beating something to fit, like we say this is regenerative, and we beat it so it fits some definition, or we expand the definition of regeneration, then we paint it to match regeneration, and then we create definitions which fit what we said we were doing. I think we are at a stage right now with regeneration that we are at risk of greenwashing regeneration. And so I'm a little worried when, Beth, I'm sorry I'm picking on you more than anybody else to start. I'm a little worried when we say we want all the definitions. I do not want all the definitions. I want a framework for us to become rigorous about what it means, because I believe it is a powerful concept that only happens in living systems as a working entity. It does not happen when we try and do living buildings or something, for example, which are not alive. Now, there's nothing wrong with doing living buildings. I'm not saying actually any of the things that we're doing we shouldn't be doing. I'm worried about claiming that they're regeneration and therefore not ever stepping fully into what it means and bringing back those indigenous stories. So that's what I'm going to invite you into today. I'm going to let you walk in the world I walk through. And I watch and listen and constantly confront people's language, like I did Trey, as he said, within 30 seconds of being on the phone. And I do that not because I care what you accept what I think. I care that your capacity to talk about what you're doing, how you got there, how it fits, how you are sure it is a really regenerative idea, because I think that's the conversation we need to have. Not all of the possible things regeneration can be, because I'm watching us lump things in that I think we probably should have dropped off as we climbed Hunter's ladder. Not that we get rid of those things, because I agree with you, they're foundational. I think we redefine them, and I think we throw out some things that we were kind of dragging along that didn't fit. So that's my invitation. So why did the companies do, and it wasn't just companies, it was organizations of all kinds, why did they rationalize and defend in the green space? And most of it is because we fear our image will be tarnished. I'm the leader. I can't possibly not be regenerative if that's the idea, or sustainability. My income is dependent on it, and I like to influence people in that way. So I think it's a challenge for any of us to decide to become rigorous and say, am I really going to watch whether or not I'm working on regeneration, or am I greenwashing myself and pulling in an idea, because I love this term, regeneration. It's so exciting. But what we lose out of that is we lose the opportunity to grow and develop. We lose the opportunity really to contribute in a whole and meaningful way to the vitality and viability of an ecosystem, including planet and society. And we actually miss the opportunity to develop some wisdom. So I'm mostly trying to say, just hang in here, even if a lot of things I'm saying feel confrontive to you. They're intended to be, of course, but they're intended to give you a way to think about things, to really challenge yourself and not other people. You can do that, and a group of people agree to work on it together, but it's to increase the capacity for rigorous examination. That's what I'm working on. So I was at Cal Berkeley in the middle of the free speech movement in the war in Vietnam. Very exciting time to be alive. I was arrested, I did all this stuff. I also sat in a class with a guy named Thomas Kuhn. I don't know whether you've ever heard of him. Yeah.
Paradigm shifts.
Yeah, paradigm shifts. He was teaching a class in the philosophy department called The History of Scientific Paradigms. And it was shaking my world completely. It was much more interesting than parading in the streets, because it was asking us to look at what was the source of why we were thinking the way we were, and what was the effects of what we were thinking. So I think regeneration goes beyond outcomes. I think it goes to effects, but it also includes processes and everything along with it. So I started, and I was, I'm 75, and I was 20 then. So that was a very long time ago, 55 years ago, playing with paradigms. So what I want to offer you is a way to consider, and I'm not sure these are right. They're ones that I've developed over this time and have increasingly been helpful to people to think with, so take them on that way to become discerning. So I'm just going to show you all four of these at once. And the top one is related to what regeneration really is. And I believe that each of these eventually subsumes and changes the one below it, but sometimes we get stuck on, the bottom of the ladder. And I actually don't think they're a ladder in any sense that you're climbing and then you're getting higher. They're a sense that you can become more inclusive. And although I don't think regeneration is the next level, and this is always risky when I put it on like this, it is a more complex level of thinking. So let's talk about what, and this is some of what's on the handout that you got. Let's look at each of these four paradigms. And what I'm going to ask you to do, I don't want to do your thinking for you, so I'd like for you to put in your mind something that you'd like to examine whether you think it is regenerative. And it'd be better if you made it personal, like something you're working with, like Savory Institute's regenerative agriculture, or a city's program or an economic development program you're working with. And I'm not going to ask you to report on this, because the job is to build your capacity to think, not to get it right. So there's no test, and there's no answers in the back of the book. This is all about developing capacity. So what I see when I look at, why is this not changing? There we go. The paradigm of extract value, which is the smallest thinking on this, is a very material worldview. And I see this at work in the world, I would say predominantly when I look about how people do things. It's how business works, which is, even though I'm an economist, I did co-ops, I did all those things when I was young. I decided that the highest nodal leverage was businesses were creating the most problem. Maybe if we could work on business, they could create the most shift. So I chose some years ago to go in, and of course what I saw was this material world view. Not only is land and resources just dead, and I can own it and possess it, but so are humans. They're interchangeable parts. One dies, no big deal. We'll just get another one. And even though companies would not say that, there is still a lot of treating people as interchangeable parts, extract value from them. It's based on the idea that everything is just transactional. Yeah, I own this, I pay you for something as little as I can, preferably, and that's all we get. Now, I wanted to give you some ideas about what I see when people are doing this. And if you don't want to take notes, I'm with Hunter. I believe my PowerPoints are your PowerPoints, so feel free, and we're going to put all of these up on the website. So it's up to you whether you want to take notes. I did put them in a form that you could. I don't usually put this many words on something, but hell, why not? So some of the practices I see that you probably experienced through time and motion studies, so you can go study how fast you should be able to do this, and by definition, everybody should be able to. So there's all I'm doing is to extract the most value out of each person, standardize and proceduralize everything. Every human being is alike, so this is interchangeable. So anytime you're working in an organization that standardizes people's work, they're working from an extract value mindset. Metrics are set up because they're things you can count. You can't count people very well, so let's just make some metrics. We'll get more out of them. So as I watch organizations that are extracting value, they've got more metrics than anything else. They don't know about measures. Measures to them are always in numbers. They are usually filled with hierarchies of authority. This framework that I gave you of paradigms is a hierarchy not of authority but of thinking to help us understand there are different worlds we can look at it from. Delegation is an idea that comes from extract value. I know what you need, we pass it down and tell people. And then best practices. So every time I see the word best practices on anything, all of those come from standardizing, homogenizing, so that we can borrow things without thinking. This particular paradigm has very little thinking in it, allowed for people who are involved. And of course, we don't take into consider the land, its aliveness, a life shed. I see the word watershed is an extract value. Can you see why? It's our water. That's where we get our water from. So we'll keep it healthy for our water. But there's some, and then some of this call it the air shed, the food shed, right? All of those are mechanical terms. And so when you are speaking that way, you're actually inviting your mind to hold it in and extract value. So I invite people to consider the word life shed, because it's full of life, and it isn't all just about us and feeding us. I watch for language cues, like we were talking about next level, or I don't remember what the words were you said anymore, but I could watch them bouncing around the language from these 4 different ones. Supply chains. There are no chains in life. Those are dead things. So we have borrowed that idea as we went in even to sustainability. We took the word supply chain with us. Right? And we take so much language with us that actually causes still hold it that way and leave. I watch some of the most well-intentioned companies, B Corps, who go about figuring out how to do something for their suppliers, but mostly in terms of the products and things they're willing to accept, but they don't actually look at what it means for them to be alive in communities and to become a part of what is a value-adding process. I don't have time to tell you where the original idea came from, out of which supply chain was taken and broken apart because people wanted to break it down. Here's some other words I invite you to stop using. Causal loops, feedback and feedback loops. Feedback loops come only out of machinery that shuts off things. So when I watch people doing feedback to one another, I know they're working in a mechanical paradigm. When I watch them talking about creating feedback loops, we have created that as a metaphor. We think it exists in nature. It does not exist in any natural system. Breaking down things and making it simple when people are trying to get control or return on investment. So just watch for language. And if you're around me, I'll help you. Watch for language. So that's the first paradigm I watch people work in the world. And we all do some of that. And by the way, we eventually do extract, the way, I don't remember your name, but your 22-year-old daughter. Yeah. There is a terrifying experience when you come to understand what extract value means, that we shouldn't do it. And what we will do, if we get to a more regenerative paradigm in how we think, we will understand the kind of reciprocity that Hunter was talking about. So it's not that we never take value from something, but we don't extract it. And so all of these can change as we move up in the world. All right, so we got very fed up with the extract value, folks. In the 1960s, I was part of the League of Women Voters and some other folks who were trying to bring about a shift in what we were thinking. And so we came up with, well, if you have an entropic worldview, you always see things declining. So we had to stop that decline. So here we stepped in with the idea of sustainability. We worked to protect, to steward, to reduce harm, all of those kind of ideas. And I did it a lot because I was at Berkeley, right? I still did it by resistance. I joined the great boycotts and many other kind of boycotting processes, trying to stop the harm and trying to expose it. I wrote articles, I wrote books trying to expose the evil stuff that was going on. I have slowly come to realize that education is a lot stronger than advocacy and particular actions, and so that's why I sit here working on education. Some of the practices that come out of this, and again, we have borrowed these things, and this is what I really want you to look at as you were looking at the one thing I asked you to select. Did everybody select something you were looking at in your mind? Teaching in a university, there are tons of these, and I teach in universities, so I can say that I have to fight with them all the time. Incentives, rewards, recognition, rating, and ranking all come from a guy named John Watson, who convinced us that we're all the equivalent of rats and we could be studied in mazes and we could teach businesses how to control them. I've got all of that in books, the whole history of how that came about. That process is being used extensively in work that is being called regenerative. We're trying to incentivize people. We're trying to rank and rate. We put out scorecards showing where people are standing relative to other people. Oh my goodness. All of that is out of a paradigm that is not true unless you manage rats. And then it is true. But most of you do not teach rats, you do not lead rats, and so all the idea about incentives, rewards, everything is related to that. In this book you're getting a copy of, there's one chapter called 30 Toxic Practices, and it's toxic to consciousness and it's toxic to regeneration. Few others are practices or circular economy. And again, these are not bad things. I'm not saying don't do these. I'm saying they're a paradigm that's incomplete. There's some things out of them we need to stop doing because they're so incomplete. And we need to evolve them from a regenerative mindset. I should draw it more like this, where you've got these four paradigms, which are still becoming inclusive, but also eliminating of things. Biomimicry comes out of this process, and the reason I say that is we're still separated from the plant. They're trying to adopt more of that, but most mimic processes are mimicking, right? Metaphor changing, so they're not quite complete. The idea of different capitals. Part of what happens here is that we create a lot of abstractions trying to find better things. I'm going to talk to you a bit about how you can do something than getting endless numbers of capitals, which is a fragmenting process. And fragmenting comes out of this worldview. Language, influence, incentivize, role model. Everybody wants to have good role models. All of you think about being good role models? So I want to tell you don't want to do good role models. And you'll see why when I get to regeneration, that role models are based on that everything should be alike. Versus John should be unique and distinctive because he is. And I should be working on helping him figure out how to be the evolution of himself, not something I role model for him to do. We set up companies to try and be role models. Then companies don't find who they are, and then they don't create what they could. We set up cities, the list of best cities. Oh, don't get me started, right? Triple bottom line. All of these are abstractions that fragment. And one of the things you're going to discover is that I don't believe you can be talking about regeneration unless you're very specific and concrete. I mean, down to the level of a person or a place, some whole, and we'll come back to that. So this particular paradigm, although it had enormously good intentions of overcoming what it was that businesses were doing that was so destructive, it layered in a few things because it drove some of that history into it. So eventually people said, well, obviously we can't just do less bad. I worked with Jeffrey Hollander in Seventh Generation to get them out of a ditch. Do you know who Seventh Generation is? Yes. They make non-toxic paper and personal care products. when I started working with them, they were going back and forth between making money, losing money, making money, losing money, and had been for 21 years. And yet they had this wonderful sustainability idea. Well, one of the things that we began to really think about is, I even to say to them, is you can't just arrest disorder. You can't just try and reduce the harm that's happening. So Jeffrey took on the bandwagon, well, let's go do good then. Let's don't just do less bad, let's do good. All right, let's look at what do good gives. Because do good brings with it some things that are very useful, but it also brings about some challenges we want to be mindful of. It's very human-centered. It's us figuring out what is good for others. That's how we took over this nation and wiped out a population of Native peoples, which I strongly relate to. It's what we do when we go into countries that we supposedly are going to rescue and help. Pretty soon, we've colonized them, and that comes out of this idea, the thought that there are ideals. So ideals is a dangerous idea. It is a word that we really ought to pay attention to because it means we've made something categorical and that it's usually human defined or one set of humans against another set of humans. That's the conversation we're in because of our president's comments last week, right? What's the ideal look like? Right? Well, even any kind of time we go toward this idea that we're trying to project our ideals onto someone else, it's usually because we're trying to do good. I've never found anybody trying to project ideals in order to do bad. They really think that they're doing good. All right, so here are some of the practices that happen in design thinking. Purpose and mission driven. Does that one surprise you? So purpose and mission are abstractions, and that's the biggest problem I have and see with what happens with the do good. We get generic ideas, we get abstract ideas about what good is, and I'm working with a group of 22 food companies right now, many of whom you'd recognize the names of probably, that were all mission driven, and they came to me and asked me to just do something for all of them because they kept hearing me talking about there's no such thing as being purpose driven. You can't be mission driven. Those are abstractions. What you need to do is become corporate direction driven based on the essence of who you are, the global imperatives that are specific to those you affect, and the intersection where you can make a difference. Now that's a longer story, but we're now working them through a different way of becoming concrete, specific. So you want to look at every raw material as a unique, specific thing, every place you affect. In fact, I'll tell you that in a second. So the challenge we have with trying to do good is we become abstract. And a few things have gotten created here. A whole bunch of ideas about the idea of surveys so that we could find out what the average was, right? This is a do-good humanistic bent that there is now so much evidence showing us it does many things. Harvard showed that first it did good for business. 85% of the things found in customer surveys turn out to fail as product development. Harvard Education Group did, and they're doing these one-on-one, right? I mean, they're not actually interviewing people, they're actually going and calculating the numbers and how much they succeed. The other thing that they looked at is typologies. How many of you know what type you are? In any typology. Do you know what your typology?
90.
They're nonsense. They have no meaning. They're abstractions. They take you away from knowing you into some categorization that the human potential movement created. And there is a great book which I want you to read so you really get over the idea that you're one of 5, 8, or 4 types. Is called The End of Average. And it's written by Todd Rose. It's a book that was out the end of last year. And there's so many things in here I'd love to tell you how to go get the understanding of how they're not very useful. Customer surveys, market surveys, climate surveys. I wrote an article, 22 years on why climate surveys destroy climate inside of a company and culture. And it has to do with it abstracts things. It makes people lose their own ability to pay attention. So these ideas all are because they take things toward abstraction. She's not leaving because she's upset. She has to go to a board meeting. Just wanted you to know. the idea of being able to get people really connected to themselves, understanding themselves, is core to building regenerative businesses and regenerative organizations. So I was giving John a bad time because he did work on surveys, right? And I said, I'm going to tell them they shouldn't listen to your survey. He says, okay, I'm going to do it anyway. And it doesn't mean that what he got isn't good for a great conversation. What I wanted to do is to go to the conversation, not stick with the data. Because the data is what literally makes an abstraction, and so do the questions, and the inability to build capacity to make those judgments. So here's some of the language. Wholeness is a language out of do good, as opposed to a whole. I don't have time to go through every one of these, but if you want to have any conversations about it, I'd be glad to do that. Emergent, it's the idea that time is linear and something is in a progression, and so it goes from here to there when, as we know, there is no linearity in anything. Even the idea of progression, ideals, being beyond something. Integration, the idea that we were anything that's named integrated something is still working on a fragmented view, because life does not need to be integrated. Integrated means takes a bunch of parts and kind of get them to fit together. So when I hear the word integration, am I making you mad yet? All the words? Says no?
It's a little annoying.
A little annoying. Okay, good. I at least want annoyance. That would be good. Because otherwise you don't go play with it. Collaboration, cooperation. Those are ideas of fragments that have to be brought together. I have a video I did with the government of British Columbia. We did a 5-year process on changing how they do economic development. And that process they hired me to do was integrated economic development. I said, I won't do that. They said, why? I said, because that's not what you want. You know, what you want really is an ability to do a story of place, and we did it for the Okanagan and the Cowichan Valley, and understand the actual, not place-based. Again, that's another word that comes out of this level. You want place-sourced. You want the place to tell you what it needs. You want to understand it from the core. So you want to move from the idea of an abstraction, which is place-based. We should be based in our place, to sourcing. All right. So what is the regenerative paradigm? And then I'm going to give you the 7 first principles in about 20 minutes that you can use to tell if you're really working for regeneration. Basically, regeneration is not about outcomes. It is about capacity building. It is about evolving and building the capacity of everything that's alive. The idea that we think we can measure soil, the other thing I should have said, one before that drives me crazy, are certifications. Certifications fragment, and they average, and they make them not look at the piece of land. I grew up in farming too. My father was a gentleman farmer, but I worked the fields. And one of the things you learn is the field here and the field over in the South 40 are not the same. And if you are trying to do regenerative agriculture from a set of certifications, you're about to go kill the soil and do the same thing to it that we were doing from before, but somebody else's idealized version of the certification. I give Jay and Andrew, as Hunter said, I give them a bad time because now they're trying to create they've created a certification for what it means to be a B Corp, and they've only listed a handful of the things that matter. And it leaves out the other things, and it doesn't cause people to look at their specific place. So certifications and anything we make generic and homogenized. Here, what we want to do is evolve the capacity by imaging a specific, concrete business, person, community, life shed, nation, something that is whole. We want to image its capacity evolving. And it has to have this concrete and specificity. The minute you have anything generic, you just left the world of regeneration. Why is that? Because regeneration only happens in living systems, and it's never generic. It's always specific to a specific place and time, and that's why you can't do the averages and the certifications and things. I don't believe you can get to regeneration without this concrete process. As I said earlier, this is a very ancient piece of work. The ancient idea, the idea of regeneration that comes from these ancient lineages. So the terms that I look for people using are value-adding processes, which is from earth to earth. So it's what you called, or not you in this room, but people have called the supply chain and the value chain. People broke apart an idea which one of the men I worked with in Procter & Gamble years ago created. A value-adding process where everything is adding value and building towards some greater effect, not just outcomes they can measure. They're always embedded systems. Nested works pretty well, but making sure they're concrete and real. And that they're always in this moment. Where is this piece of land we're about to regenerate now, today? Because it's not the same land it was before. All right, let's go look at some principles. Now, let me tell you where these came from. Don't remember exactly how long ago. It's been over 20 years. Myself and my dear friend Pamela Mang, the founder of Regenesis Group, pulled together a set of ecologists, ecological biologists, naturalists, native peoples, I'd go around in the room and remember who else was there, spiritual teachers, all to look at how living systems worked. Not to look at what regeneration meant, but how living systems really work. And you know, it turns out it is a study. You can't go look it up in a book. You can't read all the things. You have to image it. And so we spent a lot of time imaging how living systems work. And I felt so blessed to be in that room because I had people who were used to doing this kind of work, and there are very few books written about how to do this. We try to make it concrete and put it in a book and make it the rules of how it is. But one of the first things they said is living systems are always working as a whole with all the aspects that it has as a whole. Therefore, the idea of a life shed. There are no parts, so there's no rivers, there's no streams that can be regenerated because they're not a whole. A whole is the life shed in which the animals exist, in which the fish exist, in which something called a river, which is kind of artificial because the river goes way beyond where the banks are. And it's about the bears interacting with the salmon. It's that process. So if we don't go to holes, and if you don't every time start with a hole, not finally find one, but if you're going to work on regenerative agriculture, what's the whole that we're going to work on regenerating? And it has to be one nature agrees with. And living systems, by the way, is not the same thing as nature. Nature is usually thought of as an aspect. So think of it as a living system. So this is what a living system looks like, not this. So studying something to cut up and dissect a frog versus watching a frog hop, that's imaging the working of a whole. We're not looking at a whole when we dissect it. Same thing here. We can't understand humans, and we know what medicine has done to us. In fact, I was laughing when Hunter put up regenerative medicine, because regenerative medicine is really about regenerating parts. You know, how do you regrow hearts and stuff? So it's another one of those greenwashing, right? We like this idea. Looking at wholes, life sheds, communities, children. Principle number 2. There's a little bit of this in the book. Most of what I'm doing today, that book is a book I've wanted to write for a long time about how you design to work with people. It has a little bit of what I'm giving you today in it, but not much. Everything alive, every whole has an essence. It is what makes it what it is. It cannot not be itself if that went away. So how many of you have children? How many of you were children? Okay, so this still works. If you think about your child when they're very young, your first tendency is to want to get them socialized so that, you know, you watch these kids who's selfish and not sharing, and you decide you're going to socialize them in some standardized way. All parents do that. It's a freaking out moment. But you can move from, you got to get them fixed and in a fixed way, which Carol Dweck calls, to moving them to a growth mindset, which is halfway there. She got halfway there and looking at it. The growth mindset is one where we believe people can change, they can learn, and so we start doing training and education. But when I look at, and there is a story about this in the book, when you look at a child, is this child, this whole child, the uniqueness of this child, rather than what the books in psychology say about this age. So if you look at them at a 6-year-old, you get one look. If you get them as a growing, evolving one, you get another, but you don't get to the real regenerative till you see the essence of a specific child and not wanting them to be like anybody else but themselves. So this part is so crazy. It's part of the thing that those of you who know your type are giving up. You're giving up the discovery and the depth when you think of yourself as a type. Hopefully you let go of that a long time ago and are not so attracted to it. But it's categorizing is one of the things that happens at the human potential paradigm and lets us lose this sense of essence. I'm just going to do this really quickly. I said some of it, but it's always about a living whole. It is always something that's core. It actually comes from the same word as nature, which means the essential qualities, the innate disposition. It literally, in Latin, meant birth. And I believe the essence starts at birth. Now, I go do essence for a whole company. The thing we used to turn seventh generation around was discovering its essence, which is in the founder who brings it about. And once we understood Jeffrey Hollander's essence was basically about transparency and social justice, we went about creating a transparent presentation of all products, which was not required by law, but showed every chemical that was in it. So that in the same way food requires that, we had this, and eventually he convinced Lee Scott at Walmart to require this on products that came in that touched the human body. Said, why shouldn't we know what the chemicals are in them? That came from Jeffrey's essence, transparency. It also came from social justice, where we began to develop all the new programs they did. And we grew them, and those of you who know business numbers, we grew them 45 to 65% in revenue over the next 5 years. Do you know what that means? Does anybody in here have a feel for what it would mean to grow revenue 45? How about if your salary increased 45 to 65% a year? That's what it means for a business. And we created margins that are unheard of because we created distinctive products that we actually made healthier and quit calling them sustainable products and really moved to the idea that it was about social justice. So when we have the essence of something, it now comes to life. It's true of a child, it's true of a business, and it's true of a life shed. Except that we tend to have people divided up in different expertise and professions working on the life shed. It's really sad. So that we create too many categories for people. We have the personality types I already talked about, and the division of what different types of land ought to look like. So you can't, if people go do regenerative agriculture from looking at a land type, they make them all the same. They think, all right, we're that land type, right? All right, same thing here with the kid. It's the process of beginning to see essence is core to regeneration. So we've got the idea we have to start with a whole, and then we have to have essence. Now we have something else unique that can really happen, which is the third one is you work from its potential. So the biggest challenge, and I see it even in the slides that Hunter's using. I'm so grateful she goes back and does that research. Isn't that amazing? She gives us all of that. The biggest challenge is it mixes up a lot of problem solution, which comes out of an arrest paradigm, and potential ideas. So if you're working on regeneration, you're always working from the potential. Think of that child. So remember your kid, remember you as a kid. You're not working from generic ideas, but you're working from the essence of that to express more potential for that child. You done that with your kids, Trey? Sound like you have a bit. Yeah, loved listening to your stories yesterday. Our tendency is to impose ideals on the kids and not help express their potential and what they're trying to do. Have any of you seen this picture where they tried to straighten a river because it didn't meet the ideal of what they thought a river ought to look like in Ohio? There are a bunch of these pictures, but it does not hold its bank because it has its own potential way of working. But we impose ideals. So the ideals may be one of the most dangerous and toxic ideas to regeneration. And if we try and certify regeneration, we are going to kill it. If we try and create standards for it, we're back to lower paradigms. We have to move so that, and I'll give you one example with the B Corp thing. I worked with Merida Meridian, which makes sustainable textiles. And when we got there, they were following every certification you could follow. They had fair trade, they had somebody's sustainable measure, I've forgotten who it was. And so if you went to one of the places in Brazil, that was making some of their textile fibers, they had followed all the fair trade standards. So I asked if I could go down and look at the place. And I didn't even go to the little factory they had. I went out into the community and asked the community what they thought about this being here and how it was working and how the fair trade was working. And what I heard were the elders who couldn't meet all the specifications under the certified trade were losing their ability to pass along their trade. So they knew how to harvest, they knew how to dye, they knew how to weave, and they were in their 60s, 70s, and 80s, and they couldn't have jobs, but fair trade was being met. The payment was going to the people who were there. It was not building the community. The community was suffering. That's one of the examples of why certifications do not regenerate a community, which was the whole. That plant was not the whole. So they're partial. They tend to create genocide of others' ideas. So I am on a warpath against ideals and certifications and surveys right now because they're getting pulled into regeneration as a concept. Yes?
I saw the evolution of this happen in the late 60s going into the early 70s where we went from principles-based to standards-based, because then we could start arguing about whether or not somebody met the standard.
Right.
And then you got lawyers kind of involved about splitting hairs and having a defensible position rather than achieving the noble goal that we originally had in mind.
Exactly, and certifications end up having us do the same thing. They all have good intentions, not all, no, a bunch of them no good intention. But people who are trying to do, I think, with their regenerative practices now think they're doing something right so people will know when they got it, which is what you're pointing to.
Yeah, we put in rule books.
Right, and knowing, you don't want people to know when they got regeneration. You want them looking at a place, its aliveness right now, the source of the place telling its story, the people in their history, the biology, the economic development. Regenesis does this amazing work that I hire them to do, or I get my companies to everywhere I go, called building a story of place. And it starts with the hydrology of that place, the geology, the biology, the economic development patterns, the spiritual patterns that have lived there forever. That's the process of building potential because you've done the essence. Story of place is the essence of a place. Thank you for that story. The fourth one is what I really base my definition as a start on. I think that the reason we certify, or why, let me say that again, certification, surveys and so forth, not only abstract, but they don't require people to develop capacity to understand and image things. Because if we expect something to be fixed, we don't have to develop people's capacity to see. To me, regeneration, the heart of, if I'm going to regenerate a human being, is increasing their capacity for critical thinking skills and personal self-management. I mean, Hunter hinted at this at the beginning where she said, and I've seen less of this, people clawing each other down. I do think we get into relationships that we are not healthy in. And I think that's a matter of personal self-management. It's the capacity to learn to manage our own reactivity, manage our jealousy, our ego, actually our fears, all of that. So all of my work, every business meeting I walk into, whether it's the board at DuPont or in a group at Google or Seventh Generation or my CAD groups where people come and study with me, they all start, end, and are woven through with personal development. So it built with lots of reflection, because that to me is how regeneration happens. Every minute, all the time, building this capacity to see myself and to regenerate, not to pursue a particular way of being, not to pursue the answers that came off of Inc. magazine, the top 5 ways to become whatever you're supposed to do. And the 3 things you should never do. You know, I would be in so much trouble because all of them tell you don't ever disagree with anybody. I make a living disagreeing with people because I do it without judgment. I'm only allowed to do it with people I love and I'm willing to carry on the conversation with. So I have a few criteria for that. John?
Yeah, I've been through this process several times, so Carol.
Yes, you have. Yeah, it is so good.
So I want to, I would say, ask a clarifying question.
Yeah.
So capacity building is the essence of everything we do and have been for a long time.
Yes.
Yet, in looking at your definitions of, or your issue over words like integration or or collaboration, what we see is, yes, we have to work on all this capacity building, yet at the same time, we have every system that exists siloed. And organizations siloed. We have no collaboration,
Right.
no building. So, we actually believe that you have to build capacity, but you've also got to solve this breaking of the silo, and you've got to solve the lack of human behavior getting back to a collaborative environment. And so
So let me, that's a question, right?
That's a question.
Right. So I don't think collaboration does it. I think you start with redefining how the whole works. So my new book is going to answer this question for you. It is talking about why getting people to collaborate doubles and triples first the amount of work, but it also doesn't make themselves see a part of a whole and have that whole be what's sourcing it, starting with its essence. So when I designed work systems so that you never work on collaboration, because that's always you looking at somebody else next to you, not looking at the larger whole of which you're a part. So when in seventh generation, we defined who the buyer nodes were, who the stakeholders were, and every piece of work we did had people not figuring out how they worked together, but how they collectively served what it was they were serving, but we didn't build capacity of them to work together. Because it pulls the mind to we're fragmented, we're separated. I don't disagree with the problem you see. I disagree with the way to go about solving it, that you start with building capacity to see holes and work from holes, and then you restructure work. I can't answer this in a short enough time. I can tell right now.
I'd love to have that conversation with you.
You and I definitely will have that conversation. All right, so what we mostly do,
Quick question. I have seen this evolution in my own life in the PowerPoints I've been exposed to. I've shared some of your eye rolling at some of the terms.
You've said that to people.
Yeah.
Yeah, right.
However, I think there are some useful things in here, and maybe what you're speaking about is specific to a business, but we have a metric that is carbon dioxide concentration in the atmosphere. It's longitudinal over time. I think that's incredibly useful.
I don't have it, that's what I said. I don't have any problem with that nested sense of it. What I think is that won't get us there, because we don't have people who understand it. We don't have people who can image the effect of it. They can't do what your gorgeous daughter is doing. They can't have it image their own effect. And so the metric doesn't really get us to regenerate our life. So I'm not talking about you don't ever try and collaborate or you don't ever work on a metric. If that's where you stopped, do you think we're actually going to get there with just the metric of carbon?
No, but I think it's been important to motivate these kinds of conversations.
Exactly.
Right.
Exactly.
Cool.
So I am not disagreeing with that. But what I want you to do is go look at the effect on a particular piece of land or a particular life shed and ask the question there, how's carbon working here? How's it not working here? Having people image that. That's a different paradigm to work on it from rather than work on it only from the less bad.
Oh, I'm with you on the averages. I'm a geographer. I understand spatial variation, so I completely agree with all of that.
Right.
Yeah.
So I think we agree. I'm having to go fast, and so I'm telling you what you've got to bring in as something that encompasses and holds it. Now you can use metrics. In fact, you'll probably change the metrics, I think. But if you work only from metrics, you're not working regeneratively. Unless you're building capacity of the mind of people to see their effect, and then show what to do with it once they can, you can't get there. Does that make sense?
Yes.
Yeah, no, I think a cockpit is full of metrics, right? And you need them to fly the plane safely.
But you're not calling that regeneration. See, all I'm saying is don't call those things regeneration. There are things you use, but they're not a part of what is regeneration. So if somebody came to me and said, I've got all these metrics, when the earth is healthy, I would know what paradigm they're working from. And if they said, we're doing regenerative metrics, I would know where the mind is. I'm trying to improve your capacity for discernment, not tell you which things to do.
Right.
You with me?
Yep.
Okay. All right. Well, we're at time. Let me go to the end. I'm sorry not to give you all 7 out loud, but you're going to get a copy of this PowerPoint. I just want to give you one thing I think is really critical here, which is how I articulate. I don't know that I'd call it a definition, but how I articulate regeneration, which I think you've seen enough of, which is an act can be called regenerative to the degree it develops and evolves the capacity of the beneficiaries of its offering. If it is only doing something for them and it's not evolving their capacity to do for themselves, then I don't think it's regeneration. it is probably doing good because we've decided some things we ought to give them to do good. So to the degree it can develop and evolve capacity of the beneficiaries to its offerings, and it can contribute from the essence of that beneficiary. In other words, we don't decide what they need, we look at who they are. And I think this is true for a child, for the life shed, its unique distinctiveness, is for the investment and the person who's investing, for the business, for the supplier. All of these we want to contribute to their essence being realized and becoming more vital, viable, and evolutionary in the systems being actualized. Not self-actualizing, that's not enough. That's good, but it's not enough. So to me, I go back when people are saying they're regenerative, and this is what I'm holding. Is it really evolving capacity of a specific, unique, distinctive, concrete, specific whole that is seeking to be understood and source us, and we're contributing to it in a way that meets its essence being evolved and carried out, and it becoming more vital and viable. Now, there are many other things you can do. That's just the regenerative part. That's my definition. All right. All of this is coming from a group that we've been working with for years. We finally put it into an organization called the Regenerative Paradigm Institute. And our job is not to sell programs to tell anybody how to do anything. It's just to create the conversations of organizations who are trying to create this kind of work in the world. Support their ability to think, evolve their own capacity, their own paradigms. And so that's who I am here representing today. All right, I think I should stop since it's 10:32 and or 11:32 and I'm supposed to stop there. I'm assuming I should answer questions. You think so, Jason?
No, that'd be great.
Okay.
Q&A.
So here's my rule around answering questions. I don't. I only do it if you will answer the question first, because I am not an expert. And when we get into me answering your questions, I am the expert. And I'm much more interested in you posing a question using what I just gave you to play with your answer. Is that fair? No, but will you do it anyway?
Yes.
Okay, great. You have a question?
No.
No, you just like, that's why you can say yes.
That's why I would say yes.
You can model